So I know you and I have known each other for a long time, 30 years, which is kind of terrifying. And of course, we've had that time to really get to know each other. Our audience doesn't know you. So can you just give us a brief introduction of you and your current career path?
So, first of all, a very curious person. I constantly reinvent my career or find things to learn and then apply. Yeah, writer, coach, and entrepreneur is kind of my names and labels. But I really think that the things that drive me are curiosity and somehow this idea of the human experience not being catered in the workplace for so long and a shift happening, pun intended, where we can be more human at work. And I think that that's on the whole a very healthy thing. So that's what really has lit me up for the last decade in my work.
And of course, through transitions, because you've gone through many different transitions to get to where you are. And I think that's just part of the human experience. And some individuals find transitions to be more difficult than others. Can you share a little bit about some of your experiences that have shaped your perspective, your ability to navigate change and transition, and how you've kind of found this proverbial balance in it all?
So I was a bit obsessed with music, as you might remember, and I know you enjoy your music too. And I had this myopic focus on this one record label called Ubiquity Records. And I built up the courage to knock on their door. And I said, I want to work here, please. Long story short, they gave me an internship, which was glorified way of saying you can sweep the floors. And my friend Kyrie, he decided he wanted to move to New York. So timing aligned that I took his job. And I think that if I reflect back on how I ended up where I am, that trust in myself and the willing to sort of experiment and play and take risks.
Can you share an experience of how something like serendipitously occurred where you let go finally and then a door opened for you?
I've been struggling with this for 11 years now. I left London, England in 2014 after 12 years, but I didn't consciously choose to leave. I consciously chose to cater to my wandering, exploring, novelty seeking self. Closing the door to a geographic place opened the world to me. Discovering the things that really were dormant in me or catering to them happened very slowly. And I suffered or chose to suffer from comparison of Vancouver is not London, and there's such a slow pace and the energy is different, and I was a bit of a curmudgeon. However, now I can see, and again, nothing to say I would love the pandemic to have happened, for sure not. That grounded me, it halted me and the world, and I was like, thank heavens that I'm now in this beautiful place.
I love that. So it's not necessarily the looking outwards to find answers, that you can pull the community in as a grounding force to support the internal work.
That's right.
How do you truly surrender and listen internally and trust and bring in the external?
I think it depends on the person, their capacities, their access to their inner world. So one could be like, first of all, a framing of instead of having to be devastated in order to learn, there are alternatives. And I know there are because I've experimented and I know people. I need to be like literally brought down to my knees. And then I'll be like, okay, something's got to change. And then the second thing would be like a revisionist history. If you look back on relationships, professional choices, family dynamics, you could see some of the pink or red flags in hindsight. So you're like, huh, that's interesting. I normally wouldn't tolerate that. So it's a muscle, just like your biceps or your forearms, that you can work out. You can cultivate emotional agility and resiliency. You could do it through exposure therapy and like go back to these places that are, for some people, very uncomfortable. Narrative therapy and coaching can be helpful to kind of unpack and figure out like what was another way to look at that or if it's alive for you right now, what's another way?
I think too, what you're saying is like it doesn't have to be so big. It can be the micro
Hmm.
shifts and those little mini decisions.
Yes.
Letting go, surrendering, and trusting. So are there
Yeah.
any like rituals or tools that you do or that you use that really supports a more organized and creative life?
Yeah. And while you were talking, I thought of the what is now becoming much more well known of the study with rats that were shocked, and as they were shocked, they were sprayed with a scent, like some sort of cherry blossoms. And then they found that 2 generations after, when you spray the cherry blossoms, they go into fight or flight panic. So, what we're dealing with is intergenerational patterns learned from people that were living when you weren't even alive. And
Mhm.
you're now going to short circuit some of these patterns. So, it might take health scare like a history of cancer or high cholesterol or mental health that you're like, you know what? I'm going to get ahead of this. So we're back to the motivation, right? Like without some sort of like habit loop, the cue, like if I don't go to the gym, I'm going to get sluggish. Or if I do go to the gym, I'm going to feel great. Then there's the behavior, lift iron, pump weights, put on some Metallica. The reward in your case is you get to be because you pushed. For me, I get carrot cake. No, I probably would go for a donut. I get something. And instead of looking at triggers, which often people have a negative light on, you just shift the language to either glimmers or stacking triggers in a positive way, which is from BJ Frog and the Persuasive Lab. And it's been co opted or borrowed with Instagram and social media to keep us on this doom loop of dopamine. But it's usually done as a race to the bottom of the brain cell, bottom of the brain stem. Yes. And like your lower self. So you're kind of trying to reverse that and go, well, I like who I am when I have meditated. The time to meditate is before the kids get up, which means I need to wake up at 6:55. I'm not going to meditate for 20 minutes because that's insane, but I'll use Headspace for 10 minutes. My morning is really the sacred time, and things that happen after that involve, a lot of embodied stuff because I'm so top heavy and I'm kind of over indexing to the neck down over the last while.
Cool. And what about technology? Like, it's sort of a necessary evil in our world. It's possible to actually have technology that can actually be supportive rather than an enemy to
Yeah.
the process. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how you've woven into different technologies? I know that you've mentioned apps like Headspace that can support if it feels daunting to kind of meditate on your own. Anything else that you use?
So the first thing is I asked the question sort of not literally, but I'm like, is this thing going to give me more benefit than not? And typically things like social media tend to not give me more benefit. The big migration onto Facebook was 2007. In 2012, I just deleted it. And everyone was like, what are you going to do? I'm like, I guess I'm going to miss out on Facebook Marketplace, or I'm not going to be able to poke you. Like, so that was like, is this distracting? And the dance always is, do I have Netflix or Apple TV? And if I do, am I watching things that lift me up, or am I just binging and soothing? So those are examples of where technology is amazing. And I find myself going down some sort of rabbit hole or somewhere where I don't want to go. In terms of enablers and things that empower me, I mean, I'm collaborating with your team through Google Docs and even using Shift and having everything centralized so I don't have what I have typically had is anyone who looks at my computer gets anxiety because they're like, there's just too much going on. So your digital life is maybe a representation of your physical environment. And I have typically a very minimal physical environment. I don't have a cluttered desk, which is maybe an act of resistance against my grandfather, who you couldn't even see his face, which is stacked with papers. I'm like, but the question is, does it benefit me more than not? And if yes, give it a go. If it is a detractor, maybe it's an opportunity to revisit whether you should be using that or how often you should be using that.
Anything else that you would like to leave us with in terms of inspiration, thoughts throughout this conversation?
Well, there was a question around how do you start up um, a creative practice or a side hustle or even leave your company. And what came up for me is like build the raft while you're on the cruise ship. And I know that sounds like, wait, I don't want to be on a raft. I'm on a cruise ship. It has all you can eat buffet and a swimming pool and a kids emporium. The idea is like you can, just like we were talking about prototyping parts of yourself as you're in transition. If someone to me is saying, I want to write poetry, I was like, okay, well, what's your practice right now? They're like, I don't have one. And I tell them about John Grisham that wakes up at 5 a.m. and writes for 3 hours and then goes and is a trial lawyer. And he's written, I think, 38 books now every year for the last 30, whatever, 35 plus years.
Oh,
So
wow.
that is sit your ass in the chair and do the fucking work. And then you can setting up your business. I'm a fan of supporting people who are ready to go and make the leap. And it doesn't have to be this grand gesture or this rip the band-aid off of like, I'm resigning and I'm opening my company up tomorrow. A lot of people I've coached got to the point where it was just, they couldn't ignore the fact that their business is working and they now need to have that hard conversation with their boss of like, you either need to put me on contract or part-time because I'm getting phone calls or I'm getting business while I'm at work and I don't want to be that person.
Well, Jonas, this has been very inspiring, and I'm excited for all that you've shared and how many people are going to be able to take some of these little insights and be able to make shifts, and however little or small they are over time, definitely accumulate into being change and being self-actualization and change in not just doing, but being. Wrap it all back. Thank you so much for your time. I've really enjoyed speaking with you, and I hope we can find some time again soon.
Been a pleasure. Likewise.